and gentlemen, welcome to Christ Over Fear. I'm your host, Chad Jenkins. Here today, episode 42 on May 1st, 2024 at 12:30 p.m. is Matthew Headden. I'm fired up for our guest. I tell you what, I have to give a shout out to Sean French. He's the one that introduced us. Sean's got an amazing podcast that I was fortunate enough to be a guest on. And immediately during that conversation or after our conversation, he's like, hey, I've got the guy for you. I've got an individual who's a really, really great friend of mine who I'd like to introduce you to so you can have on the show. And it was a no-brainer from there. And sure enough, we get to have Matthew on the show today. I followed him recently on his Instagram. Man, the guy is on fire for the Lord. The guy is on fire for Christ. And it emanates throughout every pore of his body. I think that will probably be an indication. You'll see that today on this show, which I think is much needed. So many of us wear it maybe too tight to our chest, too tight to ourselves and not outwardly enough. And I know that's most likely not what you'll see from Matthew today. It's from Columbia, South Carolina. He was in the United States Army as an MP 95 Bravo in OIF 1, the initial invasion from Kuwait up into Iraq. So we'll talk about that and hear a little bit of that story. But most importantly, we'll hear his story in Christ and what Christ has done in his life and how he's transformed him. And then also I want to give a shout out to what he does now, Matthew Headden Coaching, which is basically personal trainer, fitness. But as I was reading into it, and I'll ask him about it, it seems like it's more holistic. It's about finding what's ticking inside and what needs to be transformed within, inside out, to focus on all the aspects of our lives. And I know he's doing that. So without further ado, let me bring my man on the show. How you doing?
Man, that was a heck of an intro. I'm like, why am I tearing up? Is there pollen going? Like, what is happening right now? Like,
hey, dude, that's you. That's you, man. That's you. That's what it's about. It's about your story. It's about your story in Christ. That's what this show's about. I had an AC go out this morning, and well, actually, it went out yesterday. And I've got a great AC company that, a small family-owned business. But the guy who was out here today, it's one of the sons that works for the dad, and Christian family, Christian company. And he was sharing with me, he was in the National Guard, and he did not have to deploy, but he had a good buddy of his that he grew up with that ended up having to deploy as a infantry guy in the National Guard, but came home with some scars, came home with some invisible wounds. And he was just sharing with me that this morning. And as he left, I walked him out. I was like, hey man, Christ Over Fear. I go, it's my podcast that I do. I go, but it's for combat veterans, wherever their walk is. Cause he was sharing, the guy maybe doesn't know where he is in his relationship with Christ kind of, but I'm like, it doesn't matter where you are in your walk. This show is for you, whether you've never opened the Bible or whether you open every single day or whether you're completely anti it. Man, there's something for you, because he's calling each and every one of us, whether we know it or not. And I think that's what I love about this, because I get to have guys like you on to be willing to share your testimony. So I'm fired up about it.
Man, that fired me up even more, man. Like, oh my gosh, like this is incredible. And you mentioned being on fire, and if I may, to quote my favorite author of all time outside of the Bible, it's C.S. Lewis. And one of my favorite quotes by him is, Christianity, if true, is of the utmost importance. If it's not true, it's of no importance. The only thing that it cannot be is moderately important.
That reminds me of Revelation, man. The seventh letter to the seventh church. You were neither hot or warm, but you were lukewarm, and I will spew you out of my mouth. And especially and how CW and your quote of that, like, we can't be lukewarm. There is no lukewarm. It's either all true or it's all false. Pick which side. Well,
that's it. I was actually having a discussion with one of my clients. He's very logical. So I was like, you'll love C.S. Lewis. He's very analytical. And I said, well, what do you think of Jesus? And he said, well, I think that he was a great moral teacher, right? And I said, okay, the implication with a moral teacher would be that he's an honest man, correct? And he said, well, absolutely. I said, okay, then were you aware that he claimed to be the only way to God? He said, I was. I said, well, then either he is a stark raving lunatic liar or he is who he says he is. He cannot be both. Which one is it?
Mhm. And,
And he just looked.
how did that what response was generated from that?
I just said, I don't need an answer. I'm just giving you food for thought. Like he
Yeah,
cannot be a great moral teacher and a raving lunatic liar at the same time.
right. Yeah, 100%. Now, give me, I love it. I can see where this is going. We go hard quick, which I like, but give me a little bit of background on you. Like, were you always this? Were you raised in church? Did you, I know you're from South Carolina, but give a little bit of the Matthew story to kind of get us even into maybe all the way up from, to get us to OIF, get us from you as a young man, young kid, growing up academically, very gifted, and just share how you enlisted in the military and all that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, man. I mean, it is the Bible Belt. So, which I cannot say without an accent, right? So it is the Bible Belt. And no, I have not always been like this. My parents are amazing. You know, my dad and I had our issues. You know, he wasn't perfect. He's a Marine Corps veteran. Like, heck,
Mhm.
have him on the dadgum show. That man will blow your mind.
All
But,
right.
you know, he was Vietnam guy. So, you know, he had his stuff, but my parents were amazing, right? Like they really were. And it was the white picket fence. I was an idiot, man. Like I was the classic too smart for my own good. I thought I
Mhm.
could outsmart everyone and everything. I never had to try. I just did it. I got kicked out of elementary or middle school and high school. I mean, it's actually funny at this point in life because, like, my middle school in school suspension guy, Mr. Alvin Porti, came to my high school graduation. I was in school suspension so much that this man came to my high school graduation. Right?
Great. And what like
um,
fighting or just cutting up or being like what was the
oh my
impetus of
gosh,
these?
it didn't matter. It was fighting. It was, you know, convincing the whole class to leave the classroom when our Vietnam veteran, like substitute teacher who couldn't hear, was turned around at the blackboard
Mhm.
because, you know, it wasn't tech back then. And the whole class left because he couldn't hear. And now I'm like, God, what a jerk move.
Mhm.
I mean, I remember spitting at a teacher. I was terrible. Like
Mhm.
I was awful. You know, skipping, which is normal.
Mhm.
And then high school, again, the too smart for my own good. I ended up at a very good school um, and hacked their computer systems and stole all the exams and sold them. So that was actually the start of my entrepreneurship.
Yeah, no kidding, which I bet was doing pretty well at the time until you got caught.
Yeah. Yeah. That stupid honor code, man, it got me. But you know, I also at the same time never really fit in, right? Like I lettered in 3 sports, but never fit in. I didn't want to be the nerd. I was, but I didn't want to be, and I wanted to be the jock. I wasn't, even though I lettered in all the sports. I got bullied a lot when I was younger because I was small, and then I flip flopped it around and became a bully
Mhm.
and became the class clown because I thought that's the only way I could fit in. So there was a lot of it was pretty tumultuous, and my poor parents, man, like, oh my god.
Mhm.
um and you know, never had a date, never got invited to the parties, never went to my senior prom, never went to junior prom, none of that.
Mhm.
So there always was this sense of lack. I did find a place in Spring Valley Baptist Church, to the point where I actually led a Sunday service on what is still my favorite book, which is James.
Mhm.
Um, but it was like so many of us, I believe, we're in the church for the community over Christ.
Mm.
Um, so that I think a lot of us can relate to that. My dad was a deacon, my mom was a Sunday school teacher. Like it's just what you do in the South. Let's
Right,
be real.
right.
Like you're going to go to church, you're going to get beat with a belt, and you're not going to eat. Like it's
Mm.
just what it is.
Mhm.
Um, and then I graduated top of my class, and even though I
So you had
never
to
learned how
have
to,
a little bit of transformation then in high school from rebellious in middle school, a little bit early on in high school to then graduating very high. No, you were still you just had the academic, giftedness, but still were kinda cutting up.
I mean, I was still getting kicked out. The reason I didn't go to my senior prom is I was suspended.
Wow. Okay.
Um, and so, not that I would have had a date anyway, but I was suspended.
Mhm.
Yeah, it never stopped. I ended up in an alternative school.
Okay.
It never stopped. I didn't pay attention in class. It was the classic, you're distracting everyone else.
Mhm.
I know you don't need to pay attention, but they do.
Mhm.
And it backfired. And I wish I never learned study habits. I never learned to pay attention. I never learned those things. So when I went to college, man, I actually had a high school teacher look at me on my way out and say, when you get to college, you will fail miserably.
Mm.
And I thought she was an idiot. Wow, was she so right?
Yeah.
Like she was right.
Mhm. Well, and I think Arizona, is that where you picked?
Well, no, so I went to a small school called Erskine College, right in the
Okay.
very beginning. Um, because it's honestly, I never really wanted to go. Like I didn't want to go to college. I never cared.
Mhm.
It's just what you do, right? Like in a lot of the cultures, it's you do well in high school, you go to college, you get a job, you meet a good woman,
Mhm.
you raise your family, you have the white picket fence, you retire, you grow old, and then you die. Like that's
Mhm.
just what you do.
Right.
And so I went because it's what I was supposed to do, even though I never really wanted to.
So then how long were you there before then September 1st?
So I went for 1 year
Okay.
and had the massive GPA of an incomplete my first semester, and then ended up with like a 2.2. So I had a pretty good like GPA my second semester, but it wasn't enough. So I left and just bounced around a little bit. And I think you'll like this. I was sitting out back with my dad one day after I left college, and I was like, "Dad, what made you join the military?" And he said, "Son, I don't have much. I was raised on a farm. My daddy died when I was 18. I got a 4 year degree because I got two associates. But what I got is mine and I earned it."
Mm.
I went and enlisted the next day.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, was it one of those, like, I mean, had you talked to him a lot about his Vietnam time and being in the Marine Corps when you grew up, or was that really not a topic that was discussed that much?
Well, he wasn't he was a logistics NCO on a ship, so he didn't see a lot of combat. He
Mhm.
talked a lot about the things his friends went through and things of that. You could still see the Marine in there, the old school Marine in there. But there was this deep reverence, especially in the deep South, early '80s and things of that nature. Like my bedroom wallpaper was American flags.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, it's what you do. Like you
Right.
love Jesus, you love America, like it's what you do, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and we thought that it would teach me discipline. Man, I was the most defiant guy in the military you've ever met, too.
Uh-huh. All right,
So
so that was September 1st, 2001, correct? Is when you went, and the conversation would have been, 31st of August, and then September 1st, you show up, and then 10 days later,
yeah,
9/11.
and took off October 15th.
Okay, so October 15th, you headed down to, where was it? Not Leonard Wood. Where
Yeah,
would,
Fort Leonard Wood. You
was
got
it
it.
Leonard
Yep.
Wood? Okay, all right, nice.
Yep.
Yeah. So then, and then you did teach the Sunday school. Was that in high school that you did that?
So I taught actually during one of my deployments. I don't recall which one. They're all kind of just blur together.
Yeah.
Um, I was leading some Wednesday services.
Okay.
I always felt like I would always come back, right?
Mhm.
Like always come back. And it was this pull. And I actually had a Chaplain Keogh. I'll never forget him. He was a Southern Baptist preacher originally from South Alabama. And he looked at me and said, if you don't end up in the ministry, it's going to be an awful waste.
Mm.
And I told him he was on crack.
Mhm.
It turns out I was the one that was going to be the drug addict. Go
Yeah.
figure.
Right.
So
All right, so get us to that. So you enlist, your first deployment you said was OIF, and it was on the initial invasion, and kind of walk us through. Well, I guess walk us through, if you don't mind, whatever you're comfortable in sharing, but kind of that walk and what Christ has done in your life, from the military through today?
Well, yeah, man, I'm a pretty open book.
Okay.
It was a lot, as you understand. It's a lot of what, the friends lost a lot of friends, saw a lot of people injured.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also what we did. And I think a lot of the struggles that I encountered later were layers, right? Everything is layers.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was, I felt like I didn't matter at all. My dad always told me when I was a kid that, when you're in the military, you're a number, not a person.
Mm.
And then, I did have that reinforced very often. And it's very true. Like, you're worth this much money.
Yeah.
For instance, like when in my first tour, we had 1025. So no doors, no armor. We had flat jackets from Vietnam, no armor.
The 1025s, is that the light Humvee?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
man.
M1025. That's what we had too, the light skin, and we took the doors off.
No doors, bro.
Because we said
Yep.
that caused more shrapnel.
Yeah. We were just like, it's hot in here. So
Oh man, that's old school there. I love it.
yeah, I mean, no bulletproof vest, no armor, no nothing.
Yeah.
And I remember them sending us to
jacket that you used to put on for like the grenade toss or whatever, like those big ones. Like
the one that's like legitimately like just some canvas crap. You know what I mean? Like,
yep. No.
And you're like, why am I even wearing this? Like, what is this supposed to do?
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was funny, man. We were running around in, brown t-shirts and that crap most of the time with no helmet. I'm like, dude, I don't even have any armor. What's this thing gonna do?
Yeah.
But I remember them moving us to a town called Samara, and the reason they moved us there was because they lost 2 Abrams in a week, and they're like, okay, you guys are up, and we're like, we don't even have doors.
Yeah. Great. And now you're gonna sit there.
But that does solidify, like, hey, that tank is worth more than you.
Mm-hmm.
So, just those kind of little things reinforce over and over, and then, the people. And then as an MP, if anybody knows what we did, especially back then, like, it was the second highest mortality rate in the Army.
Yeah.
It was the route recon, route clearance, door kicking, like all of that. Though my second tour did afford me the opportunity to call in an A-10 for air support, which was like watching the Archangel Michael come down from heaven.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of it became, the famous quote, be careful when fighting monsters that you don't become one yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that happen, and those things I'll leave out, where you go, I'm a monster.
Mm.
Like, how could I, if I am a good person, do these things?
Mm-hmm.
And so then I became that, right? Like, that became my identity. Somebody that didn't matter, an absolute monster.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are like, how could you treat yourself that way? Like, but I didn't think I was worth anything more than that.
Yeah.
So, and let's be real, back then in the military, if you had a problem, you didn't talk about it, you just drank it.
Yeah. You're right.
So, yeah, I mean, heck, my dadgum platoon sergeant would come in my room at 5 a.m. and be like, let me get a beer before the run. Like, come on, man.
Mm-hmm.
So, it ended up pretty bad with alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And by pretty bad, I mean minimum. Let's fast forward to the end. My last year of alcohol and drugs, I spent $84,900 on alcohol and cocaine.
Okay.
I was inpatient one time for suicide. Another time I put a gun in my mouth and pulled the trigger. The gun did not go off.
And it was loaded?
It was loaded.
And it somehow, miraculously, there was a dry fire.
And I love when people go, maybe you did it wrong. I promise you I didn't.
Yeah, right. No. Now, the drinking and the drug use, was it like after returning from the first deployment, or when was, I mean, obviously probably, as a young guy enlisted in the military, you drank a little bit, previously to deploying, but when did that really start?
I mean, I drank, the college amount in college, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more. And then everybody in the Army drinks, right? Especially when you come back from a deployment, it's what you do. I mean, you go to the grocery store or the classics, or you go to the shop at load up the whole thing full of beer. I mean, that's what you spend all your paycheck on, right? Is booze, and let's be real, like back then it was strip clubs, right? So it got really out of control when the moment I woke up in the mornings. It was an immediate grab a drink, even before our 2 to 5 pound run.
Yeah.
And to go to sleep, I had to drink.
Mm.
And it just kept going. It got so deep that it was, by noon, I would have polished off a case of beer typically per day.
No kidding. Wow. I mean, and that's when you're home. What would you, just out of curiosity, what would you do like on deployments though? Were you able to have alcohol on deployment? I mean, not have it, but were you able to
We would
find it,
trade.
or
We would trade for booze.
you
Yeah.
would? Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
We actually tried to trade our gunner for a sheep and a bottle of whiskey at one point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you were finding ways to get it even while it became that much of a coping mechanism.
But I didn't realize it, right? Like I
Yeah.
didn't realize it at the time because it was such a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if everybody's doing it, nobody has a problem.
Right. Yeah. You're 100% right. I mean, when it's accepted behavior, it's like, it's the standard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy not drinking is the deviant, not you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there's not too many of those in the military.
No.
Yeah. So I guess that last year when you said you spent 84,940, what year was that? And like, I mean, obviously what happened to get you to be like, okay, I'm done.
June 9th of 2022.
Okay. Now,
Yep.
are you still in the military then, or no?
No. I got out in 2007, medical discharge, all
Okay.
that jazz.
Okay.
Yeah, there were some injuries and stuff like that too.
Okay. Got it. But then, I guess from '07 to 2022, you're kind of running this trail of booze and drugs. Is that correct? Or back
Yeah,
up and down, or was it always full tilt, or what was that like?
it was a lot of alcohol until it was all alcohol. And the funny thing is, right, like I was able to justify it in my head
Mm-hmm.
because monetarily and career wise, I was fairly successful.
Yeah.
It was back to the original pattern of I'm smart enough to do this.
Yeah.
Right. You have enough charisma. You're smart enough. I ended up becoming the fastest promoted general manager that Gold's Gym in South Carolina had,
Mm-hmm.
setting national sales records. And the only reason I never got fired, I mean, I was past. They had to send the CFO in one time because I passed out drunk on the bathroom floor, and they had to get them to unlock the door and drag me out of work.
Mm-hmm.
I would be giving tours of the gym and puke in the bathroom and have people meet me outside.
Yeah.
It was out of control.
All right. But you were kind of what I would imagine is kind of a high functioning though. You're high functioning, and you can overcome that with your skill set, as you said, and you can be high functioning, whether, I don't know if you constitute as alcoholic or just, dependent upon alcohol, and you could mask that where you could still function outside of that.
Yeah, I mean, let's call it what it is, a pathological liar.
Mm. And why do you call it that?
I mean, your entire life is a lie. You're
Mm.
lying to yourself because you're not willing to face what's going on. You're
Mhm.
masking it. You're
Mhm.
lying to everyone else because you're telling them you don't have a problem.
Mm.
Right? Everything in my life was a lie.
Yeah.
Like I was a professional hypocrite. I say that I have a PhD in hypocrisy, a professional hypocrite delivered. Right? Like I'm sitting there
Dude, I
teaching
gotta
people.
I gotta steal that one. PhD.
Yeah, man. I
That's a
got the
good
logo. I'll send it over to you,
that's
man.
a
But
good one. We all have
yeah,
that though. I mean, my
we're,
goodness, you're
we're all hypocrites. Every
right.
one of us. To this day, I'm still a hypocrite. We all are.
Right.
Um, That's why I love when people say, well, the church is full of hypocrites. I know, right?
Yeah, I know.
If they weren't, they wouldn't need it. So um, it was pretty bad. By pretty bad, I mean like I would go missing.
Mm.
People would have to try to come find me. I did have 2 divorces in the process. And I've reconciled, one of them and I are amiable, which is good. And I'm very happy for her. She was with a great guy. But it wouldn't have mattered, right? Like that's the implication. It wouldn't have mattered who I met. I met that one person that got away because she was the perfect person, but at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And that person came later, but I was lying to everyone. But really the biggest implication there is I was lying to myself.
Yeah.
And that's why I say that I was a pathological liar, because I don't have a problem. They're stupid. I don't have a problem. It's them. And that's where, to this day, I say, like, if you keep encountering the same problem with a bunch of different people, like the only common denominator is yourself.
Right. Yeah.
So it wasn't the in-person. It wasn't losing all those amazing people in my life that triggered it for me. It was actually Memorial Day a couple years ago. I actually went over to a client's pool. I had grown up as neighbors with their husband, and I used their pool. I ended up crushing a case of beer, a couple drinks, ended up knowing the neighbor as a DJ. We ordered an 8-ball. The husband ended up seeing it on my face. He helped rationalize it. That was the thing. Well, with what he's been through, it's okay. No, it's not. No, it's not. Like, I made myself a victim and I rationalized it, right? Like, everybody is a victim at some point. Whether you choose to stay one is your choice. And went through that cycle again. I'm never going to drink again. 3 days later, what am I doing? I'm never going to do this again. 3 days later, what am I doing? So many of us do it with so many things. So I do understand. Like, I'm empathetic, and it's what allows me, I think, to be a pretty good coach. Like, I understand. I know you want to change, right? Like, let's dig.
Yeah.
And if we fast forward, then I had another breakdown and ended up like in a massive depression. If we fast forward, I went out. I said I wasn't drinking, was hanging out with a friend of mine in Matthews, North Carolina. And she's like, I thought you weren't drinking. And I was like, well, it's pretty outside. There's that cue craving response reward thing. And I ended up pounding a bunch. Anyway, she convinced me to go home, and I wasn't going to go. And I looked at her from the couch and I said, if I'd have stayed, I'd have shut that bar down, wouldn't I? And she goes, yeah. I was like, I'd have missed my clients in the morning, wouldn't I? She goes, yeah. So I went to bed, and I was driving back at 3:30 in the morning, 4:00. And I just started praying, man. Like, this always gets me, so bear with me. Like, I just started weeping. And I was like, God, I need a hand. Like, I need a hand, man. Like, I know I have a problem. I know I've had a problem. And I know I can't demand you give me a sign or anything, but if you give me one, that'd be pretty rad. Right? Like, verbatim. And then I went back, listened to the song Offering by Third Day, and just wept. And I went and trained my people. And my 9:00 was late. My attorney called me because this is a Thursday. And I had a court date Monday for a DUI that I was super guilty on. Like, so it was brutal. It was awful. And how the cops didn't find the cocaine in the car, I don't know. And my attorney calls, and to fast forward it, he said, well, anyway, the point of this is, Matthew, the entire case is dismissed. 4 hours after I prayed for a sign to quit.
Yeah.
I hit my knees right there. Looked up, and I said, never again. I'm yours.
Yeah. I
surrender. I'm yours. And no AA, no meetings, no nothing, just God. And people say, but how are you strong enough? That's the point. I wasn't. She was. I was trying to fill holes, God-sized holes with earthly things, and that does not work.
Well, and your visualization of that story and just sharing it, one, how powerful it is, Matthew, but then, you know, literally, literally, it reminds me of a saying my pastor used to say is, um, if you don't get down on your knees, Jesus will bring you to your knees. And I mean, literally, he brought you to your knees with that news. And you said, I am yours. You've got all of me now. And how much you know, he has to do that in our lives in order to get all of us and to bring us to that point. What a powerful, powerful story, though, man. So thank you for sharing it.
It's an honor, man. I just, that's, trials can become testimonies if we allow them.
Hmm. Well, and I think also, that what time frame was that? When did that take place? 2022,
June 9th. Yep.
June 9th of 2022, and that's what I have said in mine. My story is, and I want to ask you if it's similar. Like once that happened for me, then is when I saw him start to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. When everything started lining up, and it reminds me of in Matthew. Jesus says, "I am in you if you are in me," and I think it's a full way street. Like he doesn't want 95% of Matthew. He doesn't want 99.2% of you. He wants all 100% of you. And once you did that, can you just talk about kind of, I know the 4 hours later the attorney called, but what else kind of started to line up?
Within 8 months, I was on a stage in front of hundreds of people talking
Mm,
in, and then Miami. And I was like, I don't know what you're doing.
mm-hmm,
None of this was my plan. And it's interesting because my money with my business went down,
mm-hmm.
but that was also an idol because I
Yeah.
was successful there. I mean, I was making over 6 figures a year
Uh-huh.
while maintaining this lifestyle. Right. So,
Right.
um, and so things did line up and they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found that. And I love one of, one of the biggest things that bothers me in the common message of the church today and the way that we've taken it is, well, God's timing.
Mm-hmm.
Bro, you took your own time. This isn't God's timing. You made your own choice. Stop it.
Mm.
Right? Like God never wanted me to be an alcoholic drug addict. That was
Yeah.
probably not his will for me.
Right. Right. Right.
He did not want me putting a gun in my mouth. He saved me from my own idiocy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, so he's like, I have this ready for you. Like that, to your point, I have this ready for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's right here. But I need you to get there. I need you to prepare. And it goes back to James 1, 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you go through trials of many kinds, because then you develop perseverance and wisdom and you will be complete, lacking nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I know that's probably not verbatim, but it's when we step under the shelter, out of the storm, and keep our eyes on him, everything will line up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not saying like, oh man, I'm going to have all this abundance, which is such a common message of these earthly things, right? It's not saying that you're going to have your Tesla or any of that, right? Like I'm working harder than I've ever worked now.
Mm-hmm.
What he's saying is, and this really resonates with me, I will give you the desires of your heart. Yes. But he also is supposed to change your heart and take over your heart and change the desires of your heart to align with him. I'm pretty sure he doesn't care if you have a Tesla or not.
Right.
But it's what really started aligning for me. Some business, some this, some that. I have more joy in my life than I have ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have a successful business, but I have fulfillment in my business. I have fulfillment in him. I have a circle of men that are absolutely beautiful, Christ-driven people. They're not even followers. They're just driven to pursue him savagely and relentlessly. I have an amazing person in my life that is my partner. And I have just, that's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
My business is successful. But what he did was align me to where I get to help Christians now with their health, because that's a command too.
Right.
And he's used my story to help them. And that's the powerful part to me. Like, I get to wake up every day and serve in every action that I have. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah. What do you do to keep the fire?
Well, why is the first planet on fire? Why is it uninhabitable?
Why is I didn't miss
Why
the
is
first.
the first planet, right, basically fire?
Mm-hmm.
Because of its proximity to the sun, right?
Correct.
Same.
So keep yourself as close to him as possible.
And then you have no choice but to stay on fire.
Yeah.
So every morning I'm in the Word. Every morning I pray. Every time I switch tasks, right? So on my way to work, I either listen to a sermon or I listen to praise music. When I switch tasks, i.e., I drive home from my in-person clients, I listen to praise music or I listen to a sermon. Then I go into my personal work or my online work. Then when I switch tasks, I listen to another one.
Mm-hmm.
He is always my focus.
Mm-hmm.
So stay hot by staying close to the sun.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, really powerful. And it's just, I like that though. I mean, the analogy is awesome, but then also giving the practicality of what you actually do. I like that in between tasks of what you're doing is refocusing on what the number one priority is, what the true audience is. Each and in between, throughout the day, not just, I mean, I might actually steal that from you because, morning time, yes, is precious, but then throughout the day, to continue that focus, I think that's huge.
It's just something that's worked for me. It's an if this, then that. It's this cue craving response reward. Like if I coffee, then I Christ, right? Like I tie everything to something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't remember to do that. We'll tie it to something else.
Mm-hmm. And then with you, I mean, I think it is unique, and that's what I love about Christ. He can do anything to anybody that he wants, right? He is God. I think it's amazing on the on that. Forgive me, was it June 9th? June 9th? What was the day? June 9th of 2022. I mean, it almost gave me like a, Saul to Paul type, road to Damascus type thought when you shared that. But there are others, there are others who might be on a longer journey to distance themselves to whatever they've, become reliant upon, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's work, whether it's, whatever their vices, so to speak. What do you tell them? I mean, because your story is unique. I think it's awesome. I love those stories. But what do you share with, like, whether it's clients, friends, former, people you serve with, who are like, your story is yours, but who are on that journey that is more of a struggle and it's not instantaneous. What do you recommend to them?
Don't try it alone. And the biggest thing that had to shift, right, is I asked this question: are we treating symptoms or are we treating sources?
Mm-hmm.
That is the big thing. We have a massive problem with treating symptoms. My alcoholism, my drug abuse, my using women to fill these holes, those were symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
The source was that I didn't feel like I was worth something.
Mm-hmm.
The source was that I felt like a monster. Well, if my identity is not mattering and being a monster, then all of my actions are thus going to identify with that identity.
Right.
So we have to dig in and look at that.
Mm-hmm.
And it carries over, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's porn, whether it's whatever. right? Like, let's use maybe what I would use with a client, right? Well, if you identify as fat, all of your actions are going to go back and identify with that.
Mm-hmm.
So now we need to create an identity of who we want to become, but that's hard. It's not easy.
Right.
And we have to treat the source. And if we I actually just made something for this today, and the exact verse just left me, but I believe it's in Luke. He says, you do not put new wine into old wineskins, right?
Yeah.
You have to put the new wine in, or it will burst.
Right. Yep.
I could not change because all the stuff that I was trying to do was trying to put new into old, and it doesn't work. You're going to burst. So like if it's somebody wanting to break free of being overweight and take control of their health, well, the Bible also tells us to clean the inside of the cup.
Mm-hmm.
The inner work is the inside of the cup. The diet's not the fix. It's why are you doing these things?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's your emotional comfort. Okay, why?
Mm-hmm.
So it's always to dig. And until someone is ready to dig, there's not a lot I can do.
Mm-hmm.
But it depends on the person, right? As always, the answer depends. But the implication is to act like a 5-year-old. Treat yourself like a 5-year-old. Why? And keep asking why until there literally are no more. And if you can only get 1 or 2 layers deep with why, then you're not there yet.
You're not digging yet.
Digging.
How much of your business, I don't even want to call it a business. I mean, it's your calling. How much of that, I was reading through, I pulled your LinkedIn profile and read that to prep. But when I was reading, I was like, man, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you're going to those conversations more than, fitness training, although that's like the tail end, that's the outward. It's what you have to do to go to the inward is what you're talking about, where you really can make an impact on somebody. I mean, you're almost, fitness coach is definitely not the correct title. I mean, because it's so much more on what you're helping transform with people.
Yes, and I would say that it's not that I'm necessarily so much more. It's just that most people are missing the point. Like, can I have someone set their macronutrients up, give them their workouts, and get them results? Yes. However, if you have tried diets repeatedly and you have tried to lose weight repeatedly and it has not worked, then that's not the problem. So why try to solve it again? It's not it. So that is why we do dig into your why, right? Like, what is your why? It always gives us something to go back to, right? And then I give people a dare once I gain their trust, right? Like, I have to earn their trust. We have to earn their trust in everything we do. And if somebody just, for instance, says, well, I'm proud of myself for not quitting. I'm proud of you too. That's awesome. May I ask you a question? Yes. Why was that an option? Because the version of yourself that you wanted to create, that requires consistency. So let's go back to your why. What's your why? Well, my why is I want to be strong and happy and healthy for my kids. Like, I want to watch them grow up. I want to play with them. Okay. So you're quitting on your exercise, or you're quitting on your children? Are you quitting on your exercise, or you're quitting on your obedience to God? Because He commands us to exercise and eat well. Right? Like, well, I want to do this so I can watch my grandkids. So are you quitting on this? Or are you quitting on being healthy and being able to play with your grandchildren? So what are you doing? And some people may say that's harsh. No, it's reality.
Right.
It has very little to do with the diet. It has very little to do with the exercise. Yes, I'm very, very good at those things. But you can Google the workout. You can Google your macros. You know that if you eat lean meat and vegetables and fruits most of the time, you're probably going to be healthy. So what's the hang up?
Well, and it probably also goes to, um, what you had said earlier about when I was like, "Okay, how do you stay on fire?" And I like your, you stay close to the fire, stay as close to the source, to stay close to Jesus. But then also the community aspect, and I'd imagine that there's not that it's community, but more a relationship that individuals, clients feel with you. There's that bonding that then helps them, um, where you say, "Oh, you can Google it, you can do whatever," but they're looking for that professional relationship that, a lot of times you probably know more details of them than maybe their spouses or whoever. I mean, you're getting deep into that, and that connection is what then forms that bond and that success story of the transformation of those individuals.
It's 100% it. It goes back to so many people feel stuck, alone, and overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And nobody should ever feel that way. I felt that way for most of my life.
Mhm.
So there's no judgment toward my clients.
Right.
Like I've had a client literally walk in with powder still on his face in person. I'm like, hey buddy, like come here, come here. And I just hugged him. And I
Yeah.
was like, I love you.
Yeah.
Like, and I had a client just this week, like that went binge eating mindlessly. And there was so much guilt and shame. I was like, we don't do guilt and shame here.
Yeah.
We do conviction. Guilt and shame doesn't come from Christ. And you are a beloved child of God.
Mhm.
Like that's so it's in the same way that we stay close to the Son. That's why we do create this identity of who we want to become.
Mhm.
And we stick close to that and we align our actions with that. So, for instance, my identity is that of a beloved child of God who is a strong, happy, healthy Christian man who leaves everyone he meets better than he found them. So
Mhm.
now I align everything I do with that.
Mm.
And so it's when I stay close to that identity, I'm staying close to him and
Mhm.
who he created me to be. And it makes my decisions much easier. If it doesn't align with that, the answer is no.
Yeah. And that's powerful because I think that's really, at the end of the day, that's what Jesus envisioned with the church. That's what he envisioned on how the church would function. Not that it's a social gathering, to go and be a community type atmosphere. But I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that one because that statement you just said was so powerful on, if the version I want to be is, that image of him, then every action I do is replicating, of making that individual that I'm encountering better. Man, if we ask that question on every individual we encountered, whether it's by chance or whether it's an interaction that we have, daily, how much different would our course of action be if we had that at the forefront?
You keep that question and then the person you want to become, both of those aligned and close tight to the chest.
Hmm.
Bro. And if I may, real quick,
Yeah, you may.
we said, well, there's a lot of people that keep Christ close to, right? We're right here and I don't share it.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
No, no. I did that for so long. And the reason you've seen that shift in my content is because I was fighting God.
Mm.
I was accepted by some of the best coaches in the world, and they're friends of mine.
Hmm.
Like they're incredible. But I was afraid they'd shun me for this. But
Hmm.
that's still a connection, right? So do I pursue God and love him with my whole heart? The honest answer to that is no.
Hmm.
And none of us do.
No, there's times
None of
where
us.
we
It's not
waver.
possible.
Right.
The goal is to pursue him a little bit more every day. But, right. So if I go to your Instagram, I know that you're married and you have children, right?
Hmm.
Okay. The church is the bride of the Christ. The church is made up of the people. You don't hide your bride.
Hmm.
You wear your proof on your finger as a wedding ring.
Hmm.
We wear our proof in our walk, in our
Hmm.
actions, in our speech. For those of you who deny me before my brother, I will deny you before the Father.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I love now there. Truth be told, if I may, I like using that. If I may, I'm gonna steal that one from you too. Uh, But truth be told, I mean, there are times. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those where I could almost be in Chad's own way, where I'm like, oh, I wasn't strong enough in my faith. I wasn't, I didn't wear it out outwardly enough. And then I've actually had to give a little bit, or actually accept a little bit of his grace in that too, not my own grace, but his grace. Like, hey, there will be another opportunity that he will present to be bold. I not to compare with anybody else, because it's not a race against others. It's only a race of ourselves towards him. Um, but I do love how passionate you are on that. I mean, I think what that does is it invigorates others to unleash their boldness in him as well, and be unashamed, unapologetic of their love of him. I think so. I guess I applaud you, because I just love seeing that and seeing your boldness. I think it's really, really awesome.
I appreciate it. And if I may, one more time, and I do say that I have to ask permission, right?
Yeah.
Like I have to. Um, we also, one of the things that Christians do wrong, because I'm a firm believer in this, the number one cause of atheism in the world today is Christians.
I would agree with that 100%.
To go back to the
Yeah.
GC Talk song from the 90s, right? What if I stumble? The single greatest cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge him with their lip and deny him by their lives. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. We are the only thing they have to judge him on.
Right.
But the thing is, we are screwed up. We are messed up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but we so often attack non-believers.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they accept him if we attack them with him? Our sole job, this is so cool, right? Like this gets me excited. Our sole job is to love everyone we meet.
Yep.
That's it. Gay, yep, love them. Black, yep, love them. Orange, yep, love them. Alien, sure, why not? I love them too.
Right.
So there's no asterisks there. And we love to apply our rules as Christians onto them. That's like me going to Germany and telling somebody on the Autobahn to slow down.
Right.
It has nothing to do with them. That's for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's our job to love and reflect, and for him to convict.
Yeah.
So we mess that up.
I know. Well,
so
and then
bad.
it puts pressure on individuals to do this, and then they screw. Yeah, I agree. You nailed it, because that is very, very accurate. I mean, because where I go in that too is I think about what he did in my life. I wasn't there yet. But the guys that he surrounded me with, especially like the Army football locker room, those guys loved Christ, but they also loved me, and they knew me. They knew all of me, yet they still loved me. And they did it in such a way that was only through him, that didn't turn me off. Right. So if a person's not there yet, that doesn't mean that you can't be you, I can't be me, and can't share how much I love Christ and love them. But that down the road, whether it's tomorrow or in 10 years, that he will get a hold of them in his time, and he will grab them. But to your point, if we don't share, if we don't love, then maybe that's where we use oh, well, it's not God's timing right now. No, we're called to do it.
We took our time, right? Like,
Yeah.
that is a huge premise of my coaching and everything in my life. I don't care what the question is.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is love, right? Like, well, I'll flip it back for a fun one, right? Like, well, I'm using the food for comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is that acting out of love? No, because Christ is our comfort, right? Like, we're called to find food and joy in our drink. Okay, but did you feel guilt or shame afterwards? Yes, then that's not love. Did you hurt to the point where your stomach ached or you felt bad tomorrow? Yes, then that's no longer love. So if we just literally do everything out of love your neighbor as yourself, the implication is you have to love yourself first.
Right. Yeah.
And for those of y'all that are struggling, I do want to add this, right? We beat ourselves down with so much negative self-talk. That's one of the things with so many of the women that I work with. I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm not good enough, I drink too much, I'm never going to be this or that or this. You have the Holy Spirit inside of you. Number one, you don't get to talk crap to him. You don't get to do that. But he loves you. And if we switch from operating out of love, and you may not feel like you're worth it, and us alone, maybe not, but he makes us worth it. How cool is that?
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
I mean, you're on fire, man, in a multitude of ways. I mean, I love it. We are coming up on the hour mark, and I gotta shut us down because that's where we typically go. But I mean, my goodness, Matthew, I mean, just everything you talk, I love it. It's the tagline of the show: raw, transparent, real. That's the tagline, and that's what you are, and that's why people are drawn to you. That's why Sean recommended and is close to you, and it was an instant connection of being able to have this hour with you. I'm thankful to him for it. I think it was a blessing to me. I know it's going to be a blessing to the audience. So I thank you for being episode 42 of Christ Over Fear's guest today, Matthew.
It's an honor and a privilege, and I'm really humbled that you wanted to hear me run my face. But anybody that resonates, if you reach out to me, I will talk. I will respond.
Well, and with that, how can people reach out to you? What's the best way to contact you?
I'm very, very simple. Everything is Matthew Headden. So whether it's MatthewHeaddenCoaching.com, whether it's Matthew Headden on Instagram, whether it's Matthew Headden on Facebook, my LinkedIn is really outdated. If you type that in or Google me, it'll pop up.
Okay. All right. So that's your name, which has been at the bottom of the screen today. So we'll have it on there. And man, I thank you, brother. Thanks for coming on today.
Chad, thank you, man. I hope you have a blessed day. And again, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, that was episode 42 of Christ Over Fear today, May 1st, 2024. I will have this up on the podcast players later today. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, you name it, YouTube. We already stream live. LinkedIn, we're streaming live as well. But just a pleasure to have Matthew on today. My goodness, just a man who is on fire for the Lord, and the way in which he described that and lives it, it was just evident. So it was a joy to have him on. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And until next time, continue to fight the good fight. Thanks. Bye.